This is Ari Koretsky, and welcome to Jews You Should Know, introducing the broader community to interesting and inspiring Jewish men and women making a difference in our world. Some are already famous, some not yet so, but each is a Jew you should know.
And we are back with another fabulous episode of Jews You Should Know. This week, what a treat. I had the incredible pleasure and really honor of speaking with Rabbi Berel Wein. For those who follow the history of the American rabbinate or who are fans of great Jewish orators of the 20th and 21st centuries, Rabbi Wein is a pivotal actor in both of those conversations. And more than that, he is also an incredibly innovative and pioneering scholar in the fields of Jewish history, creative Jewish multimedia, where he's produced films and all kinds of groundbreaking methods for communicating Jewish content, and his love of both Judaism and Jewish history to people all over the world. Rabbi Wein has given probably thousands of history lectures, and I often joke to people when I'm describing this conversation that Rabbi Wein has had like 5 different lives when it comes to his professional career. He was a lawyer and a rabbi in Chicago, then a rabbi in Miami, then ran the Orthodox Union, then became a rabbi and head of a yeshiva, founder of a yeshiva in Monsey, New York, then ultimately moved to Israel, the rabbi of a shul there. Really a legendary career and almost larger than life. I had the privilege of speaking with Rabbi Wein a couple of months ago around Thanksgiving time when he was visiting his daughter who lives in America, and he's certainly getting up there. He's at it, thank God, at an advanced age, an age of incredible wisdom and perspective. And again, it was just one of the ultimate honors that I've enjoyed since the beginning of this podcast, the hour plus that I got to spend in conversation with Rabbi Wein. A reminder again to reach out at JewsYouShouldKnow@gmail.com with any speaking engagement requests, as well as comments, suggestions, and so forth. Follow us on social media at Jews You Should Know on both Facebook and Instagram, spelled out fully, at Jews You Should Know with the letter U on Twitter. Hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening. Please tell others to do so as well. Show them how to do it if they don't know already, as we continue growing this podcast audience. And now, to my conversation with legendary rabbi, Jewish figure, Rabbi Berel Wein. We are here with Rabbi Berel Wein, longtime noted rabbi, historian, world traveler and speaker, and really one of the incredibly respected entities in the broader Jewish world. How are you, Rabbi Wein?
Thank God, fine.
Wonderful to have you on, and one of the esteemed rabbis that we've been privileged to feature here on this program. And as we do with all of our guests, we kind of take it from the top. And I know you've had quite a few stops on the journey, much like the Jewish people in the desert. many stops and signposts along the way. But where did it all start?
Well, I was born in Chicago, and I lived in Chicago for the first 30 years of my life. I was in the yeshiva in Chicago, Beis Medrash Torah, for 11 years.
And that's the Skokie yeshiva?
Now it's Skokie, then it was Chicago. I received smicha the year that they moved from the old west side of Chicago to Skokie. And I was an attorney at law in Chicago for 9 years. But even during that time, I had a Shabbat position as a rabbi for a minyan that existed on the north side. And I was pretty much content that I was going to be an attorney, even though I come from many generations of rabbis.
I was going to ask, what was the history of your family? How did they end up in Chicago and when?
Well, my grandfather, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi Alevi Rubenstein, was a student from the yeshiva in Volozhin. And when Volozhin closed in 1892, the head of the yeshiva, Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, intended then to go to Jerusalem. His son, Rabbi Chaim Berlin, was already a rabbi in Jerusalem, and he intended to live out the rest of his life in the land of Israel. However, when he came to Warsaw, on the way, he unfortunately suffered a debilitating stroke, and then a few months later passed away. And my grandfather then married the niece of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, famous Hasidic Rebbe, and they continued to go to Jerusalem, to the land of Israel. My grandfather came to Jaffa, to Yaffo. Rav Kook was the Rav then in Yaffo. My grandfather knew him from the yeshiva in Volozhin. And after my grandfather founded a yeshiva there in Jaffa, a yeshiva that whose building still exists. It's one of the landmark buildings in Old Jaffa. And after a period of time, my grandfather he had already a lot of family. He had 3 sons and 3 daughters, my mother. And they moved to Jerusalem. And he was on the rabbinic court of Reb Shmuel Salant, who was the rabbi of Jerusalem. So Rabbi Salant was the rabbi for 70 years in Jerusalem. To be a rabbi in Jerusalem in 70 years is almost miraculous. And then the situation in the land of Israel then was desperate. Poverty and disease, and it just was absolutely desperate. So like many others, my grandfather was sent to the United States to try and raise money to help the population in Jerusalem. And he arrived in Chicago in 1911, and somehow he stayed in Chicago, and he brought his family over. And he was the Rav in the B'nai Reuven synagogue in Chicago. And first he was a Rav in South Chicago, then in the B'nai Reuven synagogue.
Was 1911, the last time the Cubs had won the World Series?
No, the Cubs had won the World Series in 2016.
But before that?
Before that, I think they won in 1906.
1906, okay.
Something like that. But my grandfather didn't move there because of the Cubs. And what happened was that he eventually founded the yeshiva, the Beis Medrash LaTorah, the Chicago yeshiva, which now is the Skokie yeshiva. He's founded it in his own front room.
Really?
Yeah.
So your grandfather was the founder of the yeshiva?
Yeah, he had 3 students. And the dormitory was one of the bedrooms, and my grandmother was the cook, the kitchen. But within 3 years, it grew into an official institution in 1921. The yeshiva was going to mark its 100th anniversary in the near future. And he was one of the Rosh Yeshiva there till his death. And my father, of blessed memory, was a student of Reb Shimon Shkop in the Grodno Yeshiva. And after the First World War, in the 1923, 1924, he left Grodno and came again to the land of Israel. He was in the first class of Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, which Rav Kook founded in Jerusalem, and that class contained almost all geniuses. It was all the completely outstanding scholars and people with brilliant minds. And my father was there until 1929.
Who were some of the future rabbis in that class?
You had the future rabbis, chief rabbis of the state of Israel, Rosh Yeshiva rabbis. It was really spectacular. And my father left in 1929. Two reasons. One reason was the danger of the Arab riots. 1929 was a bitter year.
The Hebron massacre.
Pogrom in Hebron that almost destroyed the Slobodka yeshiva that was there. And the second reason was because Reb Shimon Shkop, who was his rebbe from Grodno, came to New York, and Dr. Bernard Revel, the head of then Yeshiva Veitzko, brought him to New York, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva at the Ritz at Veitzko, and Reb Shimon sent a letter out to all of his former students that they should come to New York to the yeshiva. And my father always told me that Reb Shimon told him in 1929, told him that Europe was done. There was no future for the Jews in Europe anymore, and that the future lay in the land of Israel and in the United States, and that therefore the students should come to New York and try and build a Jewish community in America. So my father came to New York. There was a Jew in New York by the name of Israel Rokeach, who owned a soap manufacturing company from Kovna. And his soap was the staple in every Jewish home. Half the soap was blue and half the soap was red, so you broke it in half for milchiks and fleishiks. And every Jewish home had it. And he was a man of means. And by this time, the Depression had hit the United States. And he offered a prize of $500 to the most outstanding student in Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Ochonon. And my father won the prize. Now, $500 in the midst of the Depression, the average American worker made then $200 a year. So my father had some money. And Dr. Revel, who loved my father, and he knew every rabbi in America, Dr. Revel. He's one of the great heroes of American Jewry that really never got his due. So he told my father that there's a Rav in Chicago that has 3 daughters, and that my father should go to Chicago and meet them. And he said, one of them you'll like.
Did he say which one?
So he ended up marrying the middle daughter, my mother, Esther. And he stayed in Chicago. He really an exceptional orator. Then in Yiddish, later in life, even in English. And after a period of time, he was the Rav in one of the largest congregations in Chicago. So that's how we came to Chicago.
Who were some of the early influences in your Torah career? I know the Skokie Yeshiva, or the what was its predecessor, has cycled through many of the great rabbis of America over its history as its leading lights. Who were some that you were most connected to?
When I was a child, there's no doubt that my grandfather was the greatest influence on me. He passed away. I was 10, but I studied with him, and I went to public school. There was no day school then. So I went to public school, but in the afternoons afterwards, I learned with my father and I learned with my grandfather. And then after the war, starting in 46, they formed a junior high school and regular high school that was affiliated with the yeshiva, was affiliated with the Associated Talmud Torah organization. And that I attended, from 7th grade on, I was taken out of the public school and sent to today it's the Ida Crown Jewish Academy. And in the morning we were in the yeshiva, in the afternoon we went to the Academy for the Secular Studies. And in the yeshiva I had great Rebbeim, Rabbi Herzl Kaplan, and then his brother Rabbi Israel Mendel Kaplan, and Rabbi Rogoff. And then Rabbi Kreisworth in 1947 became the Rosh Yeshiva.
Rabbi Chaim Kreisworth?
Chaim Kreisworth. So I was that was the yeshiva. It was a wonderful place, and it was a wonderful yeshiva, and we had great young men and great teachers, and we saw great people, and that inspired all of us. It pushed us. It made the difference in our lives. And that was like a golden age of that yeshiva. So and I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time to meet the right people.
And yet what's interesting is that you chose to go professionally into law at first.
Well, what happened was simply a matter of practicality. I got married, and that was at a time when nobody realized that somebody would pay you money if you married their daughter. So everybody had to fend for themselves. My father, naturally, being in the rabbinate then, had no resources.
I guess the $500 had run out.
Oh, yeah, a long time ago. So he told me, he said, I have no, you got to make your own way. And he said to me that he had an acquaintance, really was a distant relative, that had a law firm in Chicago, and that lawyer agreed to hire me as an associate in the law firm if I passed the bar. So I was able to obtain a scholarship, and I went to DePaul University Law School. I was originally accepted to the University of Chicago Law School. But the University of Chicago Law School did not have night classes. It only you had to go all day. And I was still wanted to stay in the yeshiva as long as I could. So I went to DePaul, and I went night school in summers to DePaul. And I got my law degree, and I passed the bar. And at that time, the Orthodox community in Chicago began to dissolve because the neighborhood changed. There was an absolute flight of Jews to the north side, the suburbs, etc.
Is that when West Rogers Park emerged?
That's when it started to emerge. And there were 42 Orthodox synagogues in the Lawndale area, in the old area of Chicago. Only about 6 survived. And many that survived only survived as what was then called traditional synagogues, which had mixed seating, but it had Orthodox rabbis as being the rabbis. That was a phenomenon in Chicago and other communities. Today it's passé, but so that was the wave of the future, and so I just didn't see any future for the Orthodox rabbinate, and I didn't want to become a conservative rabbi. Many of the children of Orthodox rabbis in Chicago ended up going to the Jewish Theological Seminary and became conservative rabbis because they wanted to remain in the rabbinate, and that was, so to speak, going to be the only game in town. So I became a lawyer, and I dabbled in real estate, and I was a partner in a small manufacturing firm that produced parts for cameras and tape recorders, etc. It was very interesting. And the Shabbos, I was a rabbi, and that remained that way for, as I said, 9 years. Baruch Hashem, my wife and I had 4 children, and I was we were pretty much established in Chicago. We had our ups and downs, but what lawyer does not have its ups and downs?
Did you enjoy working in that profession? Was that fulfilling for you?
No, I did not enjoy it because lawyers see people at their worst. Yeah. Nobody comes and says, I would like to do a favor to my friend. Would you help me? No. They come and say, my partner is cheating. I want to buy this building. It's always competitive. And I don't demean it, but that's the world. But it had a very negative effect on me. I didn't like it at all. But I didn't see any way out of it because I had 4 children and I had to support the family. My wife was teaching. Together we made a living. There were times that we did very well, and there were times that I didn't know where the next check was going to come from. But Baruch Hashem, thank God, we've certainly weathered all the storms. My wife had a very terrible disease from which she recovered miraculously. She was written up in all the medical books, and she lived for 50 years afterwards. So,
wow.
Well, we have to have gratitude to God for everything.
So what changed at age 30?
What changed was I had a very good friend, really a bosom friend, Rabbi Aryeh Rotman, Louis Rotman, who was a classmate of mine in the yeshiva, and really we were very close. And he was I cannot describe the loyalty that he had to Rabbi Kreisworth. Now, Rabbi Kreisworth in 1955 left the Chicago yeshiva and became the rabbi in Antwerp, Belgium.
Yeah.
But he would come for some reason, in the summers he would visit Chicago too. And whenever he came to Chicago, I naturally went to see him and etc. And he would always say to me, he said, the Jewish people have enough lawyers. You should be a Rav. I told him, Rabbi, I have this family and I don't see any Rabbonos here and I don't want to uproot everybody. But he pushed. If you knew him, he was a persistent person. He did not exist in his vocabulary. So he sent Rabbi Rotman to Miami Beach. And he became the rabbi in a very small congregation, a storefront. And Rabbi Rotman was the Rav there for 7, 8, 9 years. And then really this time of the year, Thanksgiving in America, Rabbi Rotman shows up in the office of the business that I was then running with partners, and he says to me that Rabbi Kreisworth insists that I should be his successor at Miami Beach, and that Rabbi Rotman said that he would not leave the office until I promised him that I would at least be a candidate for that rabbinate. And he said he's moving to Long Beach, but that I should go to Miami Beach. So Rabbi Rotman also was a very persistent person. And I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to beat the Thanksgiving traffic home. So I told him, he made me shake his hand, that I would be a candidate. I never really gave it very real serious thought, because I figured they're not going to take me and I'm not going to Miami Beach. But I went home and I spoke with my wife. I told her what happened. So she was a very wise woman. Women are much wiser than men. And she said, well, we should definitely consider it because I think you'll be happier. And if you'll be happier, the family will be happier. And the whole speech. So I didn't do anything for 4 months. And then one day in May, Rabbi Ruppman called me and he said, okay, you're one of the 3 finalists for the position. And believe me, the position then was not much of a position. There were 39 families in the congregation. And it was a storefront that had no money and really no people. But they said, come, so I went there, shvuas for my tryout. And I stayed up all night, and I learned with the people, and it was and I got up early in the morning, and I walked the entire beach, and Miami Beach was and is beautiful. And I was intrigued by it. And then Rabbi Ruppman, the truth be said, rigged the election. He had proxies from people, etc., and I was elected by the overwhelming vote of 20-19. And so we packed up. I sold my law practice. I sold my business. I sold my home. I sold everything in 2 weeks.
Oh my!
No matter what anybody gave me, that was it. Later on, the Lord repaid me many times over. But at the time, I really went out with nothing, practically nothing. But we moved to Miami Beach. And it was a wonderful congregation, Beth Israel, still exists today.
Sure.
And we were there for 9 years. The children were raised there. It was a different time in the United States then. We never locked our car. We never locked the front door of our house. And the congregation grew. I mean, it grew to 250 families. And not only that, but every winter I got to know and see all of the great men in the Jewish world who all came to Miami Beach. Some came to rest from the New York winter. Some came to raise funds for their institutions. But I was on I can't say intimate, but I was on a close relationship with the Pontifical Rav, with the Satmar Rebbe, with Rav Jacob Kamenetsky, with Rav Moshe Feinstein, with Rav Ruderman, with Rabbi Lamb, with Dr. Leo Young. I mean, I saw everybody, and that made a great difference to me. It helped shape my life, my understanding of people, and all of these people were extremely kind to me. I mean, the Satmar Rav, I built a mikveh in the shul. I built the shul building. We built a beautiful shul building which still exists. And as an adjunct, there was a mikveh that we built there off the shul. And so we needed it for Friday nights and for Yom Tov, etc., because the main mikveh was not in the neighborhood. Anyhow, you know, when you build a mikveh, there are always people who say that the mikveh is not. It's like building an Arab, right? The naysayers are there. That's one of the great lessons that I learned in my life, is that whatever you do, there are naysayers. Either they say we don't need it, or you're not the one to do it, or it's not right. There are many reasons that lie behind naysayers. And most of it I attribute to their own insecurity and partially to jealousy. But in any event, so there were, especially Chassidim used to come down from New York, and they would, without knowing, they couldn't believe that I didn't have a beard then, I didn't have a black suit. They couldn't believe that this, American young gotch is going to build a mikveh that's going to be good. It was against their grain. But when the Satmarov came, so he didn't say a word. We had a conversation, but he didn't say a word about the mikveh. But the next morning he went and he immersed himself in that mikveh. And that ended the whole story. And I thought to myself, what a genius. And what a kindness.
Incredible.
And I had many other kind things from him. We never discussed politics, the land of Israel, Zionism, secular, nothing. And then all the other great Rabbonim that were there, and Rabbi Neuberger from Baltimore was there. And I can't tell you the list of people that I knew. And there were other young rabbis in the area. Rabbi David Learfield, who's the world's greatest expert on Gittin. And so he was a Rav of Miami Beach with me. I knew him from Chicago. He had his family from Chicago. His father was one of the 3 original students of my grandfather. And I knew Rabbi Feldman from Atlanta. We traveled many times to Shabbat Olim together. It was a glorious time. The only problem was that there was no high school for my daughters. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. So my son we sent away to my brother-in-law, Rabbi Avraham Chaim Levine, of blessed memory, the head of Telz Yeshiva.
Telz, yeah, sure.
An yeshiva that I helped found when I was in Chicago. And my oldest daughter we also sent to live with one of my brother-in-law's family in Chicago, the Kellers. And then my wife said she's not going to send the youngest 2. She was very distraught that we send our children away. So because of that, I had many offers for rabbinic positions in the New York area. I really didn't like New York. I still don't. Not the people, but this too much, too big, too this, too that. It just isn't. It's not the way life was meant to be lived. But I had to consider it. So I was offered many positions. And I was offered positions in Toronto and in New York City and in different neighborhoods in New York, etc. But none of them appealed to me. But I was offered to be the executive vice president of the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America. Rabbi Samson Weiss was then retiring and moving to Israel, and I would be his successor. I naively thought that I could make a difference on the national scene to affect orthodoxy, to help it. So I accepted that position. I was also offered a position by Rabbi Moshe Scherer to be his associate heading the Agudas Yisrael.
You might be the only one who ever had those 2 options together.
I had a third option. Then Rabbi Dr. Belkin, who was the head of Yeshiva University, offered that I should become the dean of Yeshiva University.
Oh, my.
I mean, my story with Dr. Belkin, who was a great man, also didn't get his due. But when he saw that I wasn't very enthusiastic about that position, so he said to me, I'm going to add a perk to you that will sway you. And so he said, I'm going to assign a young man every day to park your car, to move your car. So I came from Miami Beach. I didn't know what in the world he was talking about. We had no alternate street parking then, you know. And you never had trouble getting a parking space in Miami Beach at that time. But even with that perk, I didn't accept. And I started with the Union of Orthodox Congregation.
What did you hope to accomplish there?
I hoped that we we would build a network of congregations that would attract the new generation, and that the union would be an educational and inspirational movement and not just, a bureaucratic organization. But I was unsuccessful. I could never do that. I never got past it. And,
why?
I'm not an organizational person, so, after a while it becomes turf, and, it's always the small picture, not the big picture. You never see you don't see what's going on. It becomes the political parties in Israel. That's what it becomes.
Is it the nature of things that are just large institutions that's what happens?
No, it's just the nature of people. The nature of people. You see that Moshe Rabbeinu bemoaned it. How can I carry such a people that only are interested in the small things? The Kotzker Rebbe said, I want that my Chassidim should see heaven, and they want that their cow should give more milk. So that's the nature of people. So there are people that are very good at organizational things, but most of the time, the Jewish world is not advanced by organizations. You look at what has been accomplished in America and in Israel, you see it's only individuals doing things outside the box that have pushed the envelope ahead. Anyway, after about 3 months in the job, I realized it was not for me. But I had signed a 5-year contract, and I never like to go back on my word willingly. And then Rabbi Rosenberg, Zichrono Livracha, who was the head of the OU Kashrus, and who was a great man and one of the great people that I met in Miami Beach and worked with, he passed away suddenly. And that was a tremendous vacuum, because it was the Kashrus that funded everything. And naturally, there were immediately different groups, factions, people that wanted to take it over. And there was a very wise man by the name of Nathan Gross, who was the head of the lay committee on the Kashrus division. He saw the big picture always. And he came to me and he said, you have to slide over. You have to become the head of the Kashrus and give up the bigger sounding title of the executive vice president. Just slide over and you'll save the Kashrus and you'll save the OU. And you'll be able to do more for the Jewish people than you can do in the other position. And I agreed with him. And that's exactly what happened. And then for the next 4 years and 9 months, I was the head of the Kashrus division. We did very, very major things. I brought the OU into the meat business. We expanded. We added hundreds of companies. We did wonderful things, but it was a very tough job. Very tough job.
Why?
Because there's too many interests involved. First of all, the job involves patronage. You have to assign people. You have to hire people. Everybody's got a brother-in-law that needs a job. There's a lot of money involved. And no matter how much money the Kashrus division raised, the other divisions could spend more. It's like the United States government. And in order to, there are private Kashrus organizations who, in order to justify their existence, have to say that you are no good. I don't eat OU, okay? Everybody in America is eating OU no matter what they tell you. Because the OU controls all the basic
ingredients. Yeah.
There's no Chassidish organization that has its own glycerin plant to make shortening. But it's convenient to say that the other person is no good and I am good. The Satmarov told me, he said, he was aware of the whole thing. He told me two things. This is after Miami Beach when we were both in New York. So his Chassidim wanted to piggyback, that's the wrong term, but to piggyback on our hechsher and to make a super kosher baby food, which was the same baby food that we were making. And the company that made the baby food did not want that to happen. So therefore, we could not agree to it. So I went to him and I explained that to him. And he said he understood. And then he told me, he said, what can I do? He said, my Chassidim need parnasa, he said. So that's what happens. And he also said, aser to aser. So the Gemara says, aser bishvil shetis asher. So he used to say, aser the other person so that you'll become wealthy.
It's very sharp.
He was very sharp. He was very clever. And he was very realistic. He never gave me any of the baloney, that they're going to have 20 more mashgichim or something. He never said that. Because he knew that was nonsense. He was very honest about it. And because of that honesty, I helped all of the Chassidish Shcherim. Because he was honest about it. If they need parnos, I'm going to help you.
What years was what was this were you in the OU?
72 to 77.
And then once your contract ran out there.
So I told them, I gave them notice that I was leaving 3 years before I left. I said, go to somebody else. I'm not going to do this anymore. I couldn't stand the commute. We had moved to Muncie. My wife wanted to live in Muncie because she had a sister that was there. So when I came to Muncie, we were in a neighborhood that did not have a synagogue. The main synagogue was Rabbi Tendler's shul, about a mile and a half, 2 miles from where we were. And I started to teach on Shabbos. Some neighbors that lived in our end of the woods. And eventually, we were 40, 50 families, so we decided we'd make a shul. I became the rabbi even when I was with the OU. And that shul grew into congregation-based Torah. And so when I left the OU, I had a full-time rabbinate already going in Muncie. It was a wonderful shul. It's a wonderful shul till today. They have a wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Gottlieb. And we built a beautiful building and expanded it, etc. Again, at its heyday, it was a few hundred families. And then I wanted to make a yeshiva. So I made Yeshiva Shari Torah, and the shul leased part of its land to the yeshiva. We built the building next door, and I headed that yeshiva for 20 years. It was a high school and a beis medrash and a smicha program. I have over 30 talmidim that are in the rabbinate and in chinuch, etc., all over the world. It was a wonderful place, and the yeshiva is still existing.
What made you want to start a yeshiva?
I really wanted to be my grandfather. I wanted to do what he did. And it worked out very well, because if I had a bad day in the shul, which can happen, so the yeshiva was an escape valve. And if I had a bad day at the yeshiva, then the shul was the escape valve.
What if you had a bad day at both?
Never happened both at the same time.
And why did you choose the name Shari Torah?
The name Shari Torah was the name that my Zayda gave the yeshiva in Yafal. And then I started, I was always interested in Jewish history.
When did that start?
Well, it started when I was 10 years old. I've always read all of my life. Until now, I can no longer read. My eyesight is not there, but I always read all my life. And I was fascinated. I was fascinated by, Rashi, the Rosh. Who were they? I was 10, 11 years old. I realized that there had to be a person behind the print. So who was he? And the yeshiva in Chicago then had a magnificent library, special, almost a building for a library, had about 30,000 volumes, and had a full-time woman librarian. And so I was not that adept at sports. So in the hour between the morning and afternoon Seder, I drifted into the library. And this fine woman, Mrs. Mishkin was her name, she took an interest in me, and she said, this is a good book. This is a book. They read this, read that. And I learned how to read in Hebrew very well, too, because we learned Hebrew in the yeshiva, and we learned Tanakh in the yeshiva. And there was a class in Jewish history in the yeshiva taught by a professor. And so I was always developing this interest. Now, when I was in Miami Beach, I wrote a sefer, Chikrei Alocha, that Moshe Rav Kook published. And then when I was the Rosh Yeshiva in Shari Torah, I took the Shir Kloli that I said every Friday on the Masechtas, and I wrote them up, and then Moshe Rav Kook published it in 2 volumes, in Yunei the Masechtas HaTalmud. So I was into writing. And then I had an idea. I knew Rav Meir Zlatovitz, Zichrono Livrocha, very well. And I proposed to him that I would write a Jewish history book, an art scroll, which then was still pretty much a fledgling company, that they agreed that they would publish it. And I wrote Trying for Survival, and then I continued to write. I've written maybe 25 books in my life, and I gave lectures on all topics, but especially on Jewish history, and they were recorded, and those recordings became very popular. And in fact, for many years, it was the major source of income for the yeshiva after the banquet and the tuition, and was invited on a very regular basis to travel and speak places, and did a lot in those 20 years.
How many tapes? Because I remember those old tapes. I was in high school and beyond. People would pass around the tapes and the catalogs. How many were there? It was like hundreds, 900?
1,100, 1,200.
1,200 on the Jewish History series.
Yeah.
Where do they live today? Are any of them, have they been digitized?
There's a foundation that I created, Destiny Foundation, that still deals with all lectures and tapes and everything. And today they're MP3s. You just download it. But every day we distribute tapes. We distribute these lectures. And I keep on adding to it because all of the different series that I'm constantly doing.
Do you have a favorite period of Jewish history?
I like what's going on now.
That's a surprising statement from someone who's become so synonymous with history.
My dear, you live in the present. History informs us, but you live in the present.
So then what about history is so animating to you?
Well, I think that once you have a knowledge of Jewish history, you have a different perspective of the present. You understand current events far more differently. And especially in our time, I think, listen, you see what happened to us and where we're at today. So you see the fulfillment of prophecy in front of your eyes. So I think that's a great thing. I think it boosts a person's faith. And it also gives you perspective, everything that goes on, all of the terrible things that go on and the disagreements, and it all happened already, right? Don't get nervous. You didn't invent the wheel.
What's it been like? Your lifespan has traversed the broadest renaissance of American Jewish history and also seen the flowering of the land of Israel. What do you see when you look out at the landscape today of the Jewish world?
Well, I think that American Jewry is in a lot of trouble. I don't think that American Jewry will escape the fate of all of the exiles. If you look in the words of the prophets, you realize that they did not provide for an exception. And you see it coming. You just see it coming. It's going to be very hard to be an Orthodox Jew in the United States of America, if not this year, but certainly within 10 years or 20 years. And that has consequences. And generally speaking, our future is not in the United States. Our future is in Eretz Israel. All of the problems and all of the difficulties, Eretz Israel is where you can have a truly Jewish life. And
you moved there at some point, correct?
I moved there in 1993. I moved permanently in 97. I was fortunate enough I became the Rav in the congregation Beit Knesset Anasi in Rehavia, which is a wonderful shul. And I have a wonderful associate rabbi there, Rabbi Yitiel Goldvich.
Oh, of course.
And I'm still functioning, and there are lectures and shiurim, and thank God. And I've also produced movies and documentaries. So I really felt that I'm happy that I came to movies late in life, because I would have come earlier, I'd be a movie director. It's a fascinating medium imaginable.
What do you like about it?
What do you like about it is you have a chance to create something from nothing. And you have a chance to influence people, Our movie on Rashi, I cannot remember, well over 1 million people have seen it.
What's your goal with the movies?
That's my goal. 1 million people should see it. 2 million should see it. 3 million should see it.
And experience what? What do you want them to walk away with?
They walk away with the sense of the greatness of the Jewish people and the greatness of individual Jews, and again of the fact that the Jewish world did not begin in 2000. It's a long, old story, and we've been there before. We made a series of documentaries on Jewish history in the 20th century, Faith and Fate, also. Hundreds of thousands of people have seen them. It gives you a sense of what's going on. Most people don't know that, not that they don't know, they don't see themselves in any sort of perspective. You're born, you make money, you live, you die, goodbye. That's not the perspective. It doesn't give life meaning. That's why everybody is dissatisfied. One of the things that I find there's never been a time when people have been as wealthy, as healthy as they are today, and as dissatisfied as they are today. I mean, if you read the papers or you listen to the news, this is the worst place in the world. It's true in Israel, and it's true here in the United States, and nothing is good. The old bad joke about the waiter that came over to 3 Jewish ladies who were eating lunch, and he said to them, "Is anything all right?" That's our world. Nothing is all right, because you don't see it in perspective. You don't know that your grandfather didn't have a job in the Depression, and there was no food on the table. If you knew that, you would say Birchat Hamazon differently. But you don't know it.
Do you see an interest among the young generation today in learning these things? Are you hopeful?
I'm always hopeful. I'm hopeful that they become simply hopeful because there is a young generation. Who would have thought? I look at my own family. I'm an only son. I cannot tell you how many descendants I have. So the Lord has blessed me. You imagined. I never imagined it. And the great thing about the young generation is that it becomes older. And when it becomes older, usually corrective measures kick in. Life does what it's supposed to do. Great picture, that the Nevi'im promised us, and everything that they said is coming true in front of our eyes. Get on a plane and come to the land of Israel, and you see it in front of your eyes, what the prophet said, what Yeshaya said, what Zechariah said, what Tzfania said. It's there. So what do you want? If you don't like the political party, too bad. You don't like it. Who cares?
Rabbi Wein, what are you doing nowadays? Are you spending most of your time still in Israel at the shul? Are you working on any other projects?
I'm here only for a week or two. I'm going back to certainly. I hope as long as I can to continue to serve in my synagogue, and I just have authored a book, 150 essays of mine on life and religion and society. So that book is going to come out, and I'm working on another book. I'm trying to keep busy.
Where can people learn about all of your writings? And
the Destiny Foundation. Destiny Foundation has everything about all of the books and the tapes and everything that people would want. We have a website, and the other website is rabbiwein.com. You go to that, and, it's all there.
Rabbi Berel Wein, thank you so much for your time. I cannot thank you enough. What you've seen and experienced in life has been incredible, and your insights are invaluable.
Thank you, and you be matzliach. You will be successful in everything.
Amen. Thank you very much.
This has been Ari Koretsky on Jews You Should Know. Please visit us at JewsYouShouldKnow.com and subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume podcasts. Find us on social media at Jews You Should Know. If you'd like to become a supporter of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate that, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Jews You Should Know. Finally, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review so that we can continue to grow and introduce many more people to Jews You Should Know.